Welcome to Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond, Behind the Scenes. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond, Behind the Scenes. I'm Marianne Kennedy.
And I'm Dawn Rockall, and today I'm turning the tables around and I'm going to be interviewing Mary Ann for a change.
We are also going to be looking at some behind the scenes footage of material that didn't make the final cut from some of our on-site investigations to hopefully be able to answer some questions that you, our viewers, have about the work that we do on the show.
All right, well, Mary Ann.
Yes.
On the show, on several episodes, we talk about beneficial, non-beneficial, high, low vibration energies. Can you maybe speak to that and what it means when we are talking about a place or an object or even a non-form being, and how someone might be able to understand what they might feel if they ever come in contact with that high, like a non-beneficial or beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And I get asked this question all the time, and I know that you do too. Everything holds consciousness, everything holds soul, and we experience that consciousness or that vibrational frequency in some way if you're sensitive to it. And, somewhere along the scale of consciousness or on the scale of vibrational frequency, things sit on a higher end and some things sit on a lower end. And how do we experience that? I mean, for ordinary folks, you might not think too much about how something feels and, is it a high vibrating location, person, object, what have you. You might not notice one way or the other, but one of the things that I always say is that you can learn how something, is it a beneficial energy for you to have in your space? Is the location itself beneficial or non-beneficial? And one of the ways that people can learn, where does it sit on that scale of energy is to actually just ask the question. I mean, it seems so simple, but even when I'm working with kids, kids seem to get the simplicity of this work a lot easier than adults do, is like just ask an appropriate question. So one of the questions you could ask, if you're in a new location or if you have a new object and you're thinking about bringing something home is, what is the energy of this object? And you might perceive it just as something as basic as like maybe negative or positive. I mean, I don't use those terms, but someone might perceive it that way. And often the answer in terms of, is this a high vibration object? Is this a match for me? Is this location okay? Often we perceive it just as a feeling. It's like, yeah, this feels warm and fuzzy to me, or this might feel a little bit icky to me, whether it's an object that's coming into the space, whether it's a new person that you're meeting, whatever it is, everything has information. Everything sits somewhere on that scale. And so we can become aware of where it sits by often just asking the question. And again, pay attention to how you feel in response to that question, or something that just inherently. I mean, it's not like this big enlightening moment. It's a real subtle understanding that happens, but you have to ask the question to learn. And it's important to not judge things. If something sits on the lower scale, it can be helped, it can be shifted, and sometimes it can't, or it's just not a match for you. So sometimes we just, we need to be a little more open about it, not so judgmental in the way of, this is negative or this is positive. It simply is what it is, and we get to choose what we do with that. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
It definitely does. And I think that you worded it perfectly, because it's whether or not, like I always think of, am I attracted to it, or does it make me repel?
Yeah.
Do I want to move away?
Yeah.
And that's just, I think, the first and something easy for everyone to be able to try and play with. Yeah, and I think we
can overanalyze that. We can say, well, why does it feel like this, or why doesn't it feel like this? And you can do that, or just not. Just accept that information as it is, and then make a choice according to that. Do I want this thing in my space? Do I want to be in this location, or is this just not a match for me? So I feel like this is a no-go. We don't always need to know what's behind it. If we're working professionally, maybe that's a different subject matter, because maybe we need to offer some assistance. But just in your ordinary life, just take the answer the way that it comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. What is a ghost?
What is a ghost? Okay, that's a great question. So when we're talking about ghosts, what we're talking about, and you know, this comes up in the show a lot, and you guys know that. Ghosts are the idea of sort of like an earthbound spirit. And it's not a stuck thing. It's just that what's happening is we have a soul that has left the physical body, and they haven't continued on with the soul journey. And so there's usually something here in the physical world that they are attached to or connected to or really, you know, have a vested interest in, even though they are actually no longer a part of the form world. That's what a ghost is. It's a spirit that hasn't continued on in the soul's evolution, so hasn't made its return to the universe, hasn't sort of moved through the processing of soul material and lessons from this last life. And the good thing about this is that, you know, sometimes ghosts are things that people are afraid of. And of course, you know in this work that we don't have anything to be afraid of. The power of the form body is so substantial, and when people are, when souls haven't moved on, you know, we're able to help them. And if no one helps them, they'll eventually make the transition themselves. But oftentimes we're called in this work to offer that assistance. But it's a spirit that hasn't moved on with their journey.
Excellent.
So we are going to show our very first behind the scenes clip now. Let's do that. That was the spot over there, hey?
Mm-hmm. Oh, right there.
Right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I want to leave this open for just a little bit, and we can come back and close it afterward.
That's a good idea.
Okay, moving on. Oh, all right. That's heavy. Okay.
Okay, can I just talk to you?
Yeah.
Well, what are you feeling like? You can see that you're getting a lot of
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
explain more of what it is exactly you're feeling.
Yeah, so the feeling that that I get from the energy that was in that room, one, makes me nauseous. It just means it's on the lower scale of quality in terms of energy, something that feels, you might think positive, you might think negative. I don't usually use those words, but this will be on that sort of lower scale that makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel a little bit queasy. For me, always like a cue will be I feel slightly nauseous for a moment. I feel like this was two things that we are encountering. One, I actually feel this was some type of a definitely like an intelligent energy, but I also feel like this, especially that corner, that wet corner we have over in the back, we just have like a lack of energy draining out of this place. It's like pooling, and I feel like there was intelligence to this energy here. If I were to describe it as an incarnate being at some point, it would be like a younger sort of maybe like adolescent male energy happening there that just feels like a little bit what's the word I want to find there? A little bit mischievous. And I didn't like it. It was a feeling that we don't need to have here anymore. And I feel like just coming out to play, coming back, coming out to play, coming back would be one of the things that this individual or this energy would be doing. And so for me, just clearing that energy out of the space, the way that ended up working was actually draining out through the ground. What was your experience with it, Dawn?
That was the only place I could really find it,
Yeah.
like a portal to be
Yeah,
able to,
to go down. Exactly, yeah. Just out into the earth, just to clear with, deal with, and then, you know, off to where it needs to go in its next step of its journey.
Okay, good. And why was it important not to open the door first and then open it?
Because I didn't want anything coming out or anything attaching to anybody in this room.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So nothing's attached to me?
No.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So he's gone,
Yeah. Good. We can close this now.
because there was some mischief.
Okay, so that's Todd, our producer in the background, talking, and this was a really cool show that we did. Yeah, definitely some concerns about some attachment possibilities there, and I think you have a question about that.
I do, since he was this, I call him the freezer boy. He was, he really wanted to stay in that building. And then you mentioned to Todd that you wanted to make sure that he didn't attach to him. That's a building and a person. So
Yeah.
can you explain why spirits hang around?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of reasons why spirits don't make the transition to the spirit world, or they sort of stick around. And one of them I mentioned earlier is that Often souls can have an attachment to a location. You know, sometimes they have a place that they spent many, many years in and felt very, very safe in that location. They have a reason to feel that way, that, you know, it provided comfort to them when they were here. Other times spirits can be attached to objects, something that was really important to them, and, you know, now they aren't happy about where it is, and that, you know, they have some kind of a vested interest there. Other times souls don't make the transition because, and oftentimes actually, it can be a confusion state. So in fact, I mean, and I've encountered this a number of times where a soul actually doesn't know that they've passed. And that can happen in any circumstance, but especially in circumstances if something is very quick or sudden or unexpected, there might be some confusion, and they might need some assistance to make that transition. Other reasons that souls might not make the transition is it might be a fear reason. Some souls are, you know, incredibly God-fearing, and if they had misdeeds in this life, they might be fearful of judgment when they get to the other side, which of course doesn't exist, but they might believe that it does exist, and they may not want to make that sort of move onward. So those are usually some of those reasons.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. I think we have, I actually remember, so I mentioned the freezer boy, and I know myself, I found that he actually, once we kind of found that portal into the ground, he actually went quite easily.
Yeah.
But not all of them go that easily. Some of them are very much attached to the place, the object, and I know that with, where were we? We were in the Fanjoid in Hillsburg, the restaurant.
Yep.
There was that smaller male energy.
Yep.
Kind of reminded me of Gollum. When we tried to help him transition, I know myself, I found it was really sticky. Like he was a small light being, but yet he, trying to get him to transition, it was, I'd get him a little bit and then he'd stick, and then I'd get him a little bit, and so he was a lot more difficult.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, all of them are so different. You know, some of them are really incredibly attached. Sometimes it's a function of how long they've been actually passed but not transitioned for. If it's been an incredibly long period of time, it might be harder to do the releasement. Other times that makes no difference. There's no hard and fast rule to it, but all of them are quite different. We're going to move to one more clip behind the scenes. Okay, so Paula wanted us to check out this table before we moved on. I guess there are just some vibes to this table. Now, I initially felt like this table was fairly easy to clear, but it definitely carried a personality or carried information with it. But as soon as we just went to clear that, I actually feel like sort of the way I saw this as soon as I put my hands on it was like an electric current going straight down into the ground.
Okay, absolutely. I could clear most of it, but when we were focusing on the base. It is locked in there.
It is locked in there.
Yeah, and I'd actually thought if we could, I was wondering what that was.
Yeah.
Through.
Yes. Yeah, straight down.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I actually feel like, strangely enough, I actually feel like this table is exactly where it's supposed to be right now, but I also get the sense that it has a life of its own, and things occur within it and around it. Again, I'm not going to qualify it as beneficial, non-beneficial, positive, negative. It just kind of feels like some interesting phenomenon. But I also feel like you could also consider not having it here. You could consider doing that. But if it stays, so long as it's in this house, this is the spot for it. It's somehow anchoring into the earth in some strange way, which makes it feel like very animated and very alive to me, even though this is like a table. Wow, that was pretty awesome. We are going to go to break, and we'll be right back in a minute. Welcome back to Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond Behind the Scenes. We just finished watching an awesome clip.
Yeah, it was an extremely interesting clip I found, because we were just talking about how some things can be on one end or the other end of a scale, and that didn't actually apply when it came to this table. This table, Paula, the woman who has it, it was a beautiful match to her. She really enjoyed it. It was a good match back for her. But yet with us, it was extremely loud.
Yeah, I couldn't have had that table in my space.
No, definitely not. And then also how it was so perfectly fitted for the building too, and the space that it was in. Like, everything was a very good match there. So like you said, it's not necessarily at either end. Sometimes it's just a weird match.
yeah, and that's exactly it. We want to ask, no matter where, we want to know, where does it sit vibrationally? And again, just for an ordinary person, that just might be a feeling for you. But the most important thing to ask is, like, is this a match for me? So that table's a really good example of that. Interestingly, this table was an inherited piece, and we mentioned in the clip that the table felt really rooted where it was. And we got the sense, both of us, that if the table were to be moved from that location, that we might have some strange things happen in the house, because the table felt like it really, really belonged there. So interestingly enough, we found out afterward from the homeowner that this table, from the minute it came into the house to the day that we were there, which is, years later, it has always been in that location. We learned that the table actually had gone through a fire, and the homeowner restored it from its burned condition into what it was at that point. And even during the restoration, it has always been in that exact location. So it's just interesting that there's like this animation, this life to this table, where it knows where it wants to be. And I find that really, really fascinating. Mm-hmm. So we have another clip to show you. Okay, so she's saying to me that there's somebody on the other side already that she isn't that fond of, and even has actually a little bit of fear of. There's this man in suspenders that she's referencing. So I'm just letting her know that I'm trying to communicate with her that when we transition to the spirit world, all of our sort of misdeeds and misgivings kind of like get left here in form. And that there's nothing to be afraid of. And I'm also just communicating with her to reach out to her mother, who is loving to her on the other side. So I'm just working on that as we speak. That's it. That's good. That's good. Okay, she is gone. It's going to be quieter in here now. It's going to feel, yeah, it's going to feel different in here. Yeah. The thing is about names that spirits had when they were here. Spirit people don't look like anything. They don't have bodies. They don't have voice boxes. They can't just say to us, "Oh, hi, my name's Mary. Nice to meet you," right? And so sometimes we have a sense of an important name, and sometimes we don't. And when we do, great. Hopefully it's verifiable. And when we don't, it really doesn't matter. But yeah, sometimes folks will say, well, hey, what's their name? Well, I don't know. If they could talk, then they could just tell us their whole story. But the way that they speak is differently than the way you and I speak to each other. How was your experience?
She was, the more I got to know her, she seemed very pioneer in her energy.
Okay.
And she seemed more just lost, going with the flow, following.
Okay.
So once I communicated with her that she has people waiting for her, she was very eager. She just didn't seem to know. She was just kind of following.
Yeah.
So once I connected her with some of her loved ones that I crossed over, more almost like sisters,
Yeah.
more females, she went very, very peacefully,
Yeah.
very gently.
That's interesting you say that about like sisters, and there were multiples, because Paula had made reference to feeling like the energy of many women around here. So that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that clip because it's showing a couple of things. One of the things that you had asked earlier is, what keeps people here? And this clip showed a couple of examples, but one of them that I thought was fascinating is that one of the women that I was connecting with, she actually had someone who had predeceased her on the other side, and she had a very tumultuous and volatile relationship with that person here, and so she had a lot of fear about this person. So the thought or the idea of connecting with that person again when she transitioned almost prevented her from moving forward in the process because she didn't want to come in contact with that person. So of course those contacts, are never what we are fearful that they are, but a soul doesn't always know that and needs some help. So I'm going to ask you a question, Dawn. And I know that you get asked this a lot, and I certainly do too. What is it like helping a spirit release or transition, especially when you're working with somebody else?
Well, I think the first thing is we're all individuals. We all experience our own feelings and emotions and the way that we process. I think that we all use intention. We are in our power. We use our intention. We use visualization. I have quite a few clairs that I get to use, but really it's a completely individual experience. So even though we work together, we don't necessarily always have the same experiences. It just so happens most of them, when we help them transition, we seem to be picking this, we seem to use the same portals. But yeah, we definitely pick up on different things, and there's no right or wrong. It's what I'm meant to see, and it's what you're meant to see.
Yeah, I find that too. I find that, we're going to encounter what each of us needs to encounter, and sometimes it's the same thing, and sometimes it's different things. And that's okay, because, we need to cover a whole breadth of information, and so we like to split that, and that's the way it usually works. And sometimes, we're exactly on the same spot, whether you've done this before and you're working with someone or you're just watching our show. So let's go to the next clip. The B&B. So what we're seeing here, and you'll see probably in the episode a lot of examples of this, we're seeing a number of things. We're seeing spirit attached to a place, like non-transition spirit people, that's ghosts. We're seeing a significant number of antiques that all bring in their own stories. They all have their own histories. And there's a lot of space memory, right, Dawn? Like a lot of imprints in this location.
Oh, it was so busy, and it was a big mismatch. There was a lot of clashing of all the different pieces, their energies, and the space. Yeah, it was a very busy space.
Yeah, and sometimes, we come into a location or into a new place and we don't think much about what's gone on in that location prior to us being there. We sort of just walk in and say, hey, this is my place now. But, this episode was a great example of, when you enter into a new place, or if you get a new object, one, you need to have the place cleared or clear it yourself, because whether it's beneficial or not beneficial, what we have going on there is information that is resident in that place that doesn't actually belong to you. And so when we come into a new location, we want a clean slate. We want a clear space. A lot of the work that I do is for folks who have just purchased a new property. And, a lot of people have an understanding that this place has history, and I don't want that history as part of my experience. Historical interference is a very real thing. People can pick up, whether you're psychic or not, you can pick up on, I feel a little odd in this corner, or the basement feels like this, or this particular room feels like this. There's so much contributing to what's going on in a space that, whether it's a new object, a new place, sometimes a new person or yourself, when we want to connect with something in its real present form, then we need to be able to clear it of all prior sort of information and history.
And why not do that right off the bat?
Yeah.
Before waiting to see what happens? Because in the case, this was a bed and breakfast that was about to open.
Yeah.
And with, even though we're picking up on this, other people might, but just the chaotic energy that was in the space.
Yep.
Knowing that now it's cleared, it's calm, and it's a
it.
very welcoming space for her guests.
Absolutely. It was like a lot of work to be done, but well worth it. Let's move to the next clip. Okay, that was a fascinating walkthrough, wasn't it?
Oh, it was wonderful.
so many, so busy, so many layers. One thing, Paula, that keeps coming up, just as we came back upstairs, is that I have a male spirit with me that is not a ghost. This is a spirit loved one. It's a family member, and he's like an older male. The only thing that he's saying to me straight away is that he's got a namesake here in the physical world. So someone who's named after him that he wants to acknowledge. Does that make sense to you for anybody on the other side?
Yes, that's my dad. The baby upstairs is sleeping. His name is Carter John, and he was named after my dad.
Okay, that's perfect. I need to tell you that your dad's here. This is a very different energy than any of the other spirits we've been talking about today. He's really beautiful. He has a loving energy, and he really wants to acknowledge his namesake. He's grateful for it. So that's his way of acknowledging your grandson, and he just wants you to know that.
Good.
Good. Okay, I love that clip because what it's showing is that sometimes in the work that we do, even though we might be working with the energy of a space, we might be working with ghosts, all kinds of interesting things, sometimes mediumship makes its way into this process where we have like a loved one connected to a person in the house that has a message and there's something that they want to say. And it kind of brings in another dimension because a lot of the time when we're doing investigation work, you know, it's sort of like, you know, we're there for a reason, and the reason is usually that something's occurring that's bothering someone, right? So isn't it lovely when we have like the assistance of a family member, you know, wanting to pass a message along?
Oh, definitely. Oh,
Yeah.
it's especially at the end of that investigation. I mean, how lovely for her to be left with those two messages of her father and her father-in-law.
Yeah.
And then being able to connect with a baby that he never even got to see, but she knows now that he's completely aware of it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's this amazing thing that we, you know, all of the things that contribute to the energy of the spaces, you know, you've learned about through all the episodes this season. But one of the things that sometimes we tend to forget is that our own spirit family, they're a part of our experiences that are going on here. They visit, they drop in, they have messages that they want to pass along, you know, and this was a great way of sort of like wrapping up an experience that maybe for some folks might be a little bit unsettling, knowing some of the energy that they have in their place, and then to feel comforted by, you know, someone important to them on the other side. I think that really helps. Yeah. So that is going to do our Behind the Scenes episode. I'm Marianne Kennedy.
And I'm Dawn Rockall.
And we can't wait to see you next time.